Shabbat Shalom, friends. Sometimes, most of the time, I look for inspiration in our Torah portion, and sometimes it's appropriate or it feels right to do this teaching time from something totally separate from the Torah, but that's pretty rare. I was moved by the way a painful story that I've been not able, I guess, to turn away from in the news drew me right back to the absolute beating heart of our Torah portion. So, it's not a long sermon, famous last words, but just stay with me for a moment as we walk this path a little bit together. As many of you know, I was an English major at UCLA, and I love theater, and I was raised by very wise people who, certainly my dad and my mom too, are very much Anglophiles and are great lovers of Shakespeare. The bulk of the advanced courses I took at UCLA for my English major were deep dives into Shakespearean plays. We even had the merit one time of having Patrick Stewart come to our class, the Sir Patrick Stewart, and share with us from Merchant of Venice, "Hath not a Jew eyes?" That was an extraordinary experience to see this incredible actor in this tiny space, long before he was actually Captain Picard on Star Trek. But Shakespeare continues to move and challenge audiences, and there are so many modern settings of great Shakespeare plays. And a brand new one is a production of Romeo and Juliet that will be mounted in just a few weeks in London. And unfortunately, it has drawn an extraordinary amount of publicity for the casting not only of its Romeo, whose name is Tom Holland. Some of you may be familiar with this 27-year-old actor. He rose to, I guess, global fame by his portrayal of Peter Parker in one of the more recent renditions of Spider-Man. So he is extremely well known, but he was has been cast opposite a young actress named Francesca Amivuda Rivers. Francesca is Black, and she has faced grotesque racist backlash online since her casting was announced. Hundreds of Black women, non-binary actors signed an open letter calling out racist online vitriol against Amivuda Rivers. The letter has been signed by more than 800 actors, now of all genders. And among the statements, it says, "Racist and misogynistic abuse directed at such a sweet soul has been too much to bear. For a casting announcement of a play to ignite such twisted, ugly abuse is truly embarrassing for those so empty and barren in their own lives that they must traffic in hateful abuse." Now, there is an open letter that came after the production, and its producers at the Jamie Lloyd Company released their own statement condemning deplorable racial abuse online directed towards a member of our company. "This must stop," said the statement, which oddly did not name Amivuda Rivers. They said, "We are working with a remarkable group of artists, and we insist that they are free to create work without facing online harassment." What does it take for a person, any person, to be so undone that they post online for all the world to see their own racist ideologies. I can't imagine doing such a thing. We all have prejudices, let us be honest. We all make judgments based on appearances, all the time. But to give voice to that with such hateful rhetoric, I'm sure it's available. I can't bring myself to be further poisoned by what I imagine has been being said about this young, radiant actress who was, imagine the thrill of getting cast as Juliet, and opposite Tom Holland, who's considered a heartthrob by many, many people. The thrill of that, and then to face that kind of hatred for the color of your skin or the beliefs of your heart and family. It reminded me almost instantly of a very rare story in our own Torah, but one that stays with me year-round. It's not one that we will read for a number of more weeks, but I imagine that some of you are already thinking of the story in the book of Numbers, chapter 12, where Miriam and Aaron speak against Moses because of the Cushite woman he had married. Verse goes on to say, quoting them, "He married a Cushite woman." Now, the commentators over the millennia have wrestled with what it was that Miriam and Aaron, by proxy, really primarily quotes Miriam, and she's the one who gets the tzara'at, so connecting to our parsha, what it was about Moses' wife that so upset them at that moment. And though there are many interpretations, many of the classic commentators don't look for reasons beyond the fact that for some reason, and whether it reflects different traditions or different stories about the origin of Moses' wife, because we think of her as Midianite and not Cushite or Ethiopian, but regardless, in Numbers chapter 12, their problem is, for some commentators, or Miriam's problem especially, is that Moses' wife is black. Vizehu. And at that moment, that's enough. There are many other interpretations, and maybe when we get to Numbers, we'll go back to them. But the rabbis of the Talmud were so unhappy about Miriam's rank prejudice about this Cushite woman, especially because it says it twice, that they look for value in the color of Moses' wife's skin. In Moed Katan, one of the many tractates of the Talmud, the rabbis write, the Cushites historically were a dark-skinned people. And they point out a dark-skinned woman, or the description thereof, is a rare appearance in the Torah. Thus, the Torah is metaphorically saying that Zipporah, Moses' wife, was unusual in her good deeds. Ben Yehoyada, in that same tractate, a named rabbi here, says that just as a dark-skinned person is immediately noticeable among fair-skinned people, so too does an individual described as a Cushite possess a special character that should be obvious and clear to all. And what was it about Moses' wife that made her special? The Talmud of Rabbeinu Yechiel says she was exceptionally modest and unassuming in her actions. She stayed in the shadows and thus appeared darker than she might have been. In yet another explanation of the beauty of Moses' wife, said that she had superpowers, not like these in this Marvel universe, but true human superpowers to transform the physical into spiritual, to see the beauty in all things, and to transform darkness into light by her smiling countenance. These are rabbinic attempts to bolster Miriam, to bolster Tzipporah in the face of Miriam's condemnation, ostensibly for her black skin. And what is it that Miriam is stricken with? Well, of course, she is stricken with tzara'at, the very malady that our Torah portion focuses so completely upon. For centuries, the rabbis have associated tzara'at, that scaly affliction, with sins of the lips, with hateful speech. Lashon hara. The word mitzara is related to the word for speaking ill. And this, my friends, is a malady that afflicts every segment of our society. The rabbis say a loose tongue is like an arrow. Once it is shot, there is no holding it back. There is a lovely tale told of a wandering merchant who came into a town square and offered to sell the elixir of life. Of course, large crowds would surround him, each person eager to purchase eternal youth. And when pressed, the merchant would bring out the book of Psalms and show them the verse, "Who desires life? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from guile." We say it in every service. This is an age awash in corrosive mistrust. As Rabbi Artson writes, a lack of confidence in our public leaders, an alienating sense of loneliness and isolation, and he feels at times there is little hope of establishing real community until we learn to speak a new language, one of responsibility, kindness, and compassion. Tzara'at, and it is noted, of course, throughout time, the irony that what happens to Miriam is not that her skin turns black, which might have been a certain poetic justice, but oddly that her skin turns white with a scaly affliction. Very strange. She's not the first in the family to experience that too. Moses has that as well. When he doubts that the Jewish people will listen to him, he too is stricken with a scaly affliction, a whiteness of the skin. But regardless, this malady of evil speech that the internet, as glorious a tool as it can be, just gives license for people to show the worst of themselves, even as they hide in the shadows. We need to do better, and we need to curb that feeling within ourselves, and we all have it, to blurt out things that are hurtful and hateful and unfair, even if we feel like we're being the ones who are the suckers, having to rise above our baser natures to be better people. That's what the Torah wants us to do. And you might be feeling, I'm going to work on that. And maybe I'm going to show support for people who've been abused in so many ways. In this particular case, maybe you're thinking, I'd like to go to London. The show's going to be coming to Broadway apparently, but I'd like to go to London and buy a ticket and support this young actress as she makes her, not Shakespearean debut, she's been in several Shakespeare plays already, but make her debut as Juliet. And I'm going to counter all the negative and terrible and hateful voices that have tried to put her back in her place. Well, I have news for all of you. You can't, because the show is entirely sold out. Shabbat Shalom.